In this video, we want to talk about why we need to externalize our configuration, that is the properties which we put in application.properties file. So till now, whatever services we have made or applications we have made, we have put the properties inside the application.properties, which comes inside your resources folder. Okay. And when we create a jar, this application property.properties file would be inside that jar. Okay. So if you change anything in this file, you would need to create the jar again. Okay. So we don't want to do that because time and again we may want to change something in the application.properties file without we needing to build the application. Okay. So that is one thing which we need to do. So how can we do that? Well, there are various ways in which you can have this application.properties file outside your working folder and so outside your jar file. Okay, let's quickly see what are those ways. So same question I tried to put to ChatGPT and it came up with this response. Okay, so you can basically put an external configuration file as I mentioned, and the location of that file you can specify when you are trying to run the jar itself. Okay, and this location could be outside your application. You can also do it through environment variables, spring.config.location, which points to your external configuration file. Okay, and then there are some other ways in which you can do that. Okay, so this is not a very complicated thing to have your application.properties file outside your jar uh, file or outside your working directory. You can basically do this with any of the ways which ChatGPT has mentioned. Okay. The more important thing here is to understand how and why we need to externalize uh, these these application or properties files for all services. Now, obviously, if we are working with one service or one application, you can very well create your application or properties file in an external location, and using any of these ways mentioned here, you can have them. You can change the properties there without you needing to rebuild the application or create the jar file again. Just with restart, the application would start to point to the new changes. Okay, but in if we are working with microservices, then there are high chances that you would have more than one service, and so each service will have its own application or properties file pertaining to that service, and a global application or properties file you may require, which would be a common properties file for all the services included. Okay, so in that scenario, to manage your application or properties better way is to have these application or properties being configured at a centralized location. And in Spring Cloud, you have something known as Spring Cloud config server, which you can set up. Again, it would be an application in itself, a service in itself. We'll see how we can set it up. And then Spring Cloud config server, then points to Git repo, which then in turn um, uh, accommodates these files. One file each for one service, and a global configuration file as well could be there. Okay, so this makes sense because then your configuration management becomes centralized, and you just need to play around with your Git repo uh, for all of your services configuration. Okay, which makes it configuration management easy for you to basically do. Okay, so that is why better to have the configuration at a centralized location using Spring Cloud config server. And then, as I mentioned, Spring Cloud config server would not have these files placed in itself. It's a service anyway, but it could point to a Git repo, which in turn contains these files. Okay, and the config and the application.properties files for each service can directly be committed to this Git repo. Okay, now everything said and done. So we have our all the application.properties file at a centralized location, which obviously we just now understood why it is required to manage configuration better. Okay. But still, all these different services would require a restart for them to start using the new changes which we have pushed to Git repo. Okay. So how can we avoid that restart? That is also something which we will look at in one of the future videos, and that would be with the actuator endpoint. Okay, so these are the few things which we will try to address in our upcoming videos. So we understood why we need to externalize the configuration. In one of the videos, we'll see how we can set up a Spring Cloud config server. Okay, and then in one of the videos, we'll also see how we can do auto refresh of these application or properties file without be restarting each service, but with just calling an endpoint which we can automate as and when a particular properties file gets updated. Okay, so hope the concept as to why we require an externalized configuration is clear. And in the future videos, we'll try to work on creating a centralized config server and then try to use that config server to externalize our properties file. So that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.